topic was Peaceful Mind, Compassionate Speech and Action in Conflicting Times. And my talk was on sex trafficking, the work I do in Newark. And we all frequently vow to save all sentient beings, right? The Bodhisattva vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. We say that just about every time we meet in the Zendo. So this is something that is really at the heart of Buddhist practice, saving all sentient beings. And I think deeply about this myself. You know, how am I manifesting my Bodhisattva vows in my life? And I encourage all of you to think about that. So one way I do that is by noticing those people in our culture that tend to be invisible. And I have to say I learned this from Bernie Glassman, who I think you all know had a stroke recently and is recovering from that. But when I worked with him in the 90s, he taught me really to look at those people in our culture that are invisible. And so commercial sex workers are pretty invisible. More than invisible, we turn away from them. You know, there's a kind of distaste for that work. And kind of, oh, this is so subtle, these feelings, but a sense that I'm better. I don't do that. I don't do that thing. So getting to know who these women are has been incredibly helpful to me, really interesting. They are just like us. And most of the women that I've worked with are young. Most of them are very young. The youngest that I knew was 15 when I met her, and she'd been under pimp control for a couple of years already. So these girls, you know, they're runaways. They've been sexually abused themselves. They come from lives of poverty. They're often physically abused as well as sexually abused. Their lives are kind of hopeless. And they don't have, most of them do not have an education, although that's not entirely true. Some of them, in fact, do have an education, but because of other hazards in their lives, end up in the streets. And it's a very dangerous life. So there's two parts to this. One is the international scene of sex trafficking. There are many different statistics. It's really hard to get good numbers on how many women are trafficked internationally. But most of them are lured internationally, the women are lured into this, women and children are lured into this work by promises of good jobs, a better life, hope, and they follow somebody they've never met or hardly know across some ocean or into a land where they don't speak the language of the country they've just arrived at. They don't have any contacts, they don't know anybody, and they're pretty much totally dependent on whoever's power they're in, whoever brought them. And they're often unable to escape. The ones that do escape are, you know, terrible stories to tell about being beaten, having children, raising this child in this brothel, not being able to contact their families. But what surprised me the most in my work was the number of Americans. I hadn't expected that at all. I thought these were all women coming from Asia or South America. But in fact, about 50% of the women in this particular agency, and I think this is typical of the agencies, of which there are not very many, who really focus on the commercial sex workers and helping them get out of the life. So about 50% of them are American women. Many of them are women of color, but not all. And their stories are really heartbreaking. In this country, they seem to fall in love with somebody who then abuses them. So their lives up until this point are bereft of love. And they are so vulnerable to that kind of attention that they will almost do anything. In fact, they ignore a lot of what is happening because they get this little bit of attention, gives food, a sense of being special from the guy that controls them. And often they marry their pimps, they have children with their pimps, and the story gets even more complicated because then the pimp has control over the children. And if you're controlling the children, he controls the women. And they accept the fact that he may have multiple women. And this is an incredibly profitable industry. The numbers are breathtaking. I was doing a little research. Here it is, that depending on the city in the U.S., between this economy, the sex trafficking or commercial sex worker business, generates between 40 million and 290 million a year in underground money. And of course, unlike drugs, the product is reusable. Right? So the investment's very low. The pimps earn $30,000 a week in some cities. And it's quite a business. There are real rules around how to do it. And, there's a horrible book that I have. I couldn't finish it. Written by a pimp. And how he controls the women and how he picks them up and how he solicits them and entices them into his network. And then how he controls them. So, helping I had a colleague in this particular agency that I've been working with for a number of years who left the agency and went to work for the FBI, where she works in victim services. And she said that what she really surprised her was that in this agency in Newark, whose name is now Sana, the women who had escaped were all really happy to be helped and rescued and provided services and, shelter and safety and legal support. But in working with the FBI, she said some of the women were really part of the pimping network. They were very hard and not at all interested in a change in their life and were not happy about the FBI rescuing them. So people choose their own lifestyles in some sense, I suppose. We don't know what preceded that kind of attachment to a life of crime. I suppose it's no different than somebody who sells drugs or is involved in, they don't see themselves as victims, essentially. But the women that we work with in Newark are very scared and very relieved to have been found. And typically the way they are rescued is through the police. The police have multiple, there's a trained group of police who act as undercover agents, and they pose as Johns, and they recognize that the girls are young or perhaps under pimp control and want to be rescued, and they take action and take the girls into custody and find them shelter, and in some cases call one of these agencies that work directly with the women, and then prosecute the pimp. And the girls, if they come from out of town, often they'll be recruited to come to Newark or New York City from the South or the Midwest, where they are desperate for some reason and hoping for a better life. And so they have to shelter and keep the girls here long enough to prosecute the pimps, and then once the pimps are in jail, and the girls can be sent home if that's what they want. They can go home or not. So some of these girls have been just physically abused from the age of 4 or 5, and sexually abused, and so they don't know another life. They're in and out of foster care. Their parents are not involved in their lives, or if they're involved, they're not a healthy influence. And so they're really suckers for love. Suckers for love. And they have such a long way to heal. Such a long way to heal. So this agency that I've been working with is committed to providing long-term healing support, and it's really interesting to me. Well, because I'm a trauma specialist myself, and with women with anybody that's had terrible trauma in their lives, you can't really work directly with the trauma. You have to work slowly towards the trauma initially. So this agency is offering yoga, which is anything that's body-based is very helpful in terms of allowing them to relax, to find their center, to breathe. And they also offer a lot of expressive arts therapy, painting and drawing and group therapy, and they also offer individual therapy. So I have some of these. We as a Sangha, we donated $500 this year to this agency, who I've been working with for, I think, 5 years. And I'll just pass these around. I have them left over from yesterday. If anybody's interested in donating, please do so. They're kind of desperate for funds at the moment. Funding is always an issue. And there also, another interesting thing about this particular agency is that the founders are all bilingual. And so it's 3 women right around the age of 30. Who, and I would say the majority of the women that they work with are, in fact, Spanish-speaking. So the fact that they're bilingual is a really big plus. The agency is called Sanad, Sanada Wellness Institute. And Sanad in Spanish means healthy or wellness or good health. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you've got about them. But I just wanted to open your eyes to this particular aspect of our lives. And encourage you to think about your bodhisattva vows. Saving all sentient beings.